Hello everyone, I am Birdage and you're watching Epic Tabletop, when we strive to give you the best hobby experience. Now, today I've got another review for you, but we leave behind all the swords, bows and spears and we go to a modern age. As always, I will offer a rather broad context to this review, historical and personal, but if you fancy to jump right into the miniature part of this review, there are timestamps so you can do that. So now, without further ado, I invite you to watch this fascinating material. Just remember to consider subscribing and liking the materials if you fancy them, that is. Now, let's get cracking. Some time ago, at the beginning of May, to be more exact, I took a trip with my closest family to Transylvania. Well, obvious reason to go there is to check out on Dracula's castle and the folklore associated with it, but the whole land is a place of vast beauty. Located among Carpathian mountains, places riddled with some of Europe's oldest castles and mansions. Among those, there is a Palace castle. Certainly not one of the oldest, but one can argue that it's one of the prettiest. It is obviously not a medieval structure. It has, as I would say, František Josef feel to it. In fact, some places in the region feel like Alpian Austria. Well, no wonder given the history of the place. It's neither the place nor the time to talk about it, but I encourage you to seek out some information considering Romanian history. Now, while visiting Palace Castle, I came upon a curious object. A gun, obviously. I could easily place this piece in proper time period, but I was unsure what gun was it. I have a vast interest in historical periods that went through some sort of transition. Second half of 19th century certainly qualifies as that. I am fascinated by weapon development in such periods, so I got interested in American Civil War, because in many aspects it was coming of a new. Of course, I am a war gamer, so naturally I wanted to play the period, but I also read about the conflict, about rifles and guns and ships, and even got interested in metallurgy of the period because, among other things, I wanted to know why famous Parrott rifles, used extensively by Union troops, looked the way they did. Anyway, aforementioned trip was pretty wonderful, and after coming home I investigated the cannon. It turned out it was Kruppgun C64 4-Pfender Feldkanone. Forgive my German, to be exact, and actually you can find this very gun mentioned in the Wikipedia as being on display in Palace Castle. This type of gun was widely used by Prussians and Bavarians, as I understand, in 1870 Franco-Prussian War. As fortune would have it, pretty much at that time I was contacted by Stephan from Bavaria Games with a question if I would like to review his miniatures concerning, what do you know, 1870 Bavarian army. Damn, I said to myself, that is a very interesting coincidence. To be perfectly honest, I had other things in motion on my hobby table, but naturally I said to Stephan, I'll be overjoyed to review your minis if the review can happen in a month or so. He obliged and swore me with STL files containing pretty much the whole Bavarian army. Stephan was in the middle of Kickstarter back then, a successful one. It was a second installment aiming to depict Bavarian army from the Franco-Prussian conflict. A few words about the conflict itself. There are quite a few misconceptions about it. I remember that most people around me attributed France's loss to red pants being worn by French troops and their outdated rifle that was far inferior to Prussian one. That is not true. I mean, red pants are, but surely France didn't lose the war because of that. The truth about this conflict is actually fascinating, and it has a lot to do with this transitioning in weapon development that I really enjoy. When we take to account three biggest armies in this war, I mean French, Prussians and their allies Bavarians, and if we are to examine their rifles alone, we will see how different these were. Prussians were using famous Dreyse and needle rifle, a breech-loading design that was vastly superior to former muzzle-loaded rifled muskets. This weapon showed its qualities during 1866 war with Austria, whose troops back then were using muzzle loaders and witnessed the hard way progress and development in this field. Still, a Prussian rifle, as modern as it was by 1870, it started to show its age, especially if we compare it with the French army design, whose soldiers were freshly rearmed with the Chassepot rifle, another needle breech loader, but compared to Dreyse, more modern in its solutions with far greater range and accuracy. And what about Bavaria, you ask? Here situation was even more interesting. So Bavarians were also, so to speak, rearmed recently, but their main weapon was Podewils, which is a rifle musket converted to breech loader in 1867. So in this regard, they were trailing behind its Prussian allies and certainly very far behind French troops with the new Chassepot gun. Interestingly enough, Bavarians also were equipped with arguably the best rifle of the war, namely Werder rifle. Quite a different design to Dreyse and Chassepot bolt actions. Unfortunately for Bavarians, only 4 platoons of Jäger troops were outfitted with Werders. I encourage you to check those rifles and see for yourself how were they operated. I think it's quite fascinating and it will give you an insight into this particular aspect of war. There are some links in the description concerning this subject. Of course, outcome of this war was decided by quite a few more factors, and having a superior or inferior rifle was not the most important thing. I believe tactics, transportation, communication, leadership and superior artillery had a greater impact on the outcome. Again, I encourage everybody to seek out for yourself more information if you are interested in this period. Okay, so now let's talk some miniatures. Like I said, I received pretty much content of Stephan's 2 Bavarian Kickstarters, and I proceeded in my normal fashion, setting up the minis, printing the minis. Hold on. What? No supports? Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I do on occasions print a miniature or 2 with automatic supports, but the whole army? Well, I will try. So I did. Here is how I handled pretty much all the minis. After throwing them into the slicer, I used lychee, I lifted them up a bit before supporting. Although if you don't, application will do this anyway. Then I tilted them back 45 degrees. Next I opened Magic Box and turned auto orientation off. Then I pressed I'm feeling lucky button and that's pretty much it. You have to separate minis of course afterwards and position them properly on your printing space. One more thing, you could see that I used medium support per set. We will get to why I did that, but to be perfectly honest, that is not necessary, and me myself I'm using light setting pretty much all the time. Okay, so I did proceed cautiously. First I have printed some infantry. Supports worked perfectly, then some cavalrymen. Again, no problems, and all of those with light support per set. So next I loaded the tray full with infantry and most of my print failed. At first I was sure it was because of the auto support, but the nature of the failure proved otherwise. I mean, like 90% of minis was not printed at all, which means they didn't stick to the plate. Does not seem like support's fault. Few minis that print out were looking good. So I cleaned the whole thing, adjusted the printing table and started again. This time I went for some heavier stuff. I set up artillery piece along with its screw and it printed out perfectly. So I went for a plate full of infantry again. Mind you, this is my Mars 2 printer. So full plate in this case is 12 infantrymen along with separate hand palms holding rifles. This was the case when I decided to use medium per set when it comes to auto supports, but I think this was unnecessary since earlier failure happened due to printing table being unsettled rather than supports failure. Anyway, so how did it go? splendidly. Like you see, I got me 12 handsome Bavarians along with mustaches and sideburns. Now, when it comes to removing auto supports, it's an easy task, but it seems like geometry of those supports can be a bit too complicated. I mean, you will encounter a situation when supports went between legs or such, and Mini will get a bit entangled while removing those, but this is nothing major, and none of my Minis suffered because of that. After printing, cleaning, drying and all that, I wanted to do some painting for this review. I mean, I can't hope to match Stephan's prowess in this subject. After all, among other things, he paints Minis for hairy twins. And possibly you saw his name on many examples of painted Minis on Perry's website. Still, I always want to paint some of the Minis entrusted to me to see how it goes, how it feels, and how the Minis will look like painted by such an amateur as myself. So here it is what I got ready. I painted this single guy to get a feel for colors that I will use. I was trying to match the scheme I observed on Stephan's painted examples. It is a light infantry dude, a Jäger in this case, wielding a mighty Werder M1869 rifle. You can clearly see the details on his weapon, distinguishing it from Podewils breech-loaded rifle musket carried by the majority of Bavarian troops. Truly beautiful Mini with lots of details, character and gorgeous sideburns which Ambrose Burnside himself would not be ashamed of. At this point I was unsure how to base my Bavarians. Single like this gentleman or multi-base. In the end I decided for multi-basing, like these chaps from Bavarian infantry bearing a chorus of 4th Infantry Regiment. I do have a small project in mind that will see them do battle on my table, but most probably this will not happen anytime soon due to other commitments. So if they go for display for now, I would rather have them on multi-bases that presents Minis in a much more epic way, in my opinion anyway. These are to represent 4 battalions of regular infantry. They look gorgeous. I've also painted some Jägers. I've based them slightly different. Half bases, sort of. Each stand is a battalion. This case, unlike previous guys, where each base was to equal 2 battalions. I figured, since these are Jägers, I would like to be able to spread them more on the table to simulate their superior ability to skirmish. Next thing, I wanted to try my hand at some cavalry. And what could be more grander than some cuirassiers? I was wondering about how many of these should I put on one base, and as you can see I decided on 2. I'm planning 3 more bases like this for a squadron. I do not like painting cavalry very much, but I do love the visual effect once I'm done. I was planning to paint one more thing, but I must confess I have failed. Still, I'm going to show you the Minis, because even in this raw state they look awesome. Artillery. Truly gorgeous piece, and all the elements fits wonderfully together. Check out the guy regulating the height of the gun. I mean, his hand fits perfectly with the adjustment wheel. So, the reason I didn't paint this gun is very mundane. I couldn't get the uniform color right. I mean, again, I was trying to match Stephan's work, but everything I came up with was not good enough for me. It was holding me back, so I decided to leave it for another day. But because of my failure, you can actually see how beautiful the models are, even in this unpainted raw state. Now, when it comes to comparing Bavaria Miniatures with other manufacturers, I must admit I do not own any plastic kits concerning this conflict, and it is a conscious decision. I'm sorry, but just simply could not allow myself to be drawn into yet another big project. Not now. Still, I can show you some minis so you know what size Bavaria Miniatures are when printed in their natural state. So, first of all, Paris American Civil War Union troops, they're plastic. As you can see, they are very similar in size. Bavarians are slightly bigger, but it won't be visible even if you would put them in the same unit. I assume if you want to use reviewed here minis, I'm sure at first what comes to your mind are Paris plastic kits for War of 1870. And according to what I see, they'll be almost perfect match. On Stephan's Kickstarter site there's a picture comparing those two. Like I said, very similar. Now, these Jouards are an interesting thing to check out. Again, very similar in scale, and if you want to put some Tilleriers Argeliens into your French army, this set is actually perfect. I mean, preferably you would use arms with Chassepot rifles from French plastic kit, but even without it, with proper painting, they will fit right in. Because uniforms-wise, they are pretty much identical to those used during Civil War. Now, plastic cavalry for Civil War from Paris is smaller than our Bavarians. I have some English metal cavalrymen for America War of Independence, also from Paris, and it is visibly smaller as well, so this might be a rule. Now, comparing to some Napoleonics, our Bavarians are identical with Piano War Games minis. No wonder, since Lucas from Piano was the sculptor. This light French infantryman is 3D printed as well. Unpainted French infantryman is from Warlord, a much chunkier than Bavaria mini, sort of on par with Duchy of Warsaw printed trooper on the left from Polkowski Miniatures. I hope that this gives you some idea. I love these minis. I think they are superbly proportioned and expertly sculpted. I'm overjoyed that I can have them in my collection. There is one thing that caught my eye though. If they were plastic minis, I would probably not notice it at all because such details would have been blurred. I mean, is it just me or the Podewils gun held by infantry at trail is incorrect? I mean, the rifle cock is on the inside of the gun? Shouldn't be on the outside? Anyway, for me it's just a detail that I can certainly live with. Like I said, the minis present themselves wonderfully, regardless. So if you like them like I do, don't forget to check Bavaria Miniatures store. Content of the second Kickstarter is not there yet, but you will have plenty of joy and fun with all the infantry models available right now. That's it for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe my channel, and I see you soon. Till next time, cheers!